Good morning, Florida. It's 6 a.m. sharp, and you're tuned in to 104.5 FM. I'm Larry, and this is your favorite Saturday wake up call, the Green Hour. Grab your coffee, step outside, and take a deep breath because today we're diving into everything plants, grass, and gardens. Whether you're a seasoned gardener or just trying to keep that one stubborn plant alive, you're in the right place. I'll be sharing tips, stories, and a whole lot of green inspiration. And hey, if you've got questions, doubts, or a plant mystery you can't solve, send them my way. I'm here to help you grow, literally. So let's get this garden party started. This year we try to have a pumpkin patch. Pumpkins are huge. I mean, if you're going to grow a pumpkin, you need a little bit of room. I mean, the leaves are big. Everything's big on that plant. But it's very easy if you start in spring. I like pumpkin pie. I like pumpkin bread. My wife is a great cook, so she uses it on everything. She makes everything. Harvests the own pumpkin, makes the own bread, makes the crust by hand. It's a completely different animal. Where you stopping by the local grocery store and buy. But anyway, we started out with the pumpkins early this spring, and it's the things are thriving. It's with the cooler weather. If you start early, there's not as many bugs or things going on in the garden. As there is in the late in the season. If you want to have pumpkin for grow your own pumpkins for fall, and you got to start around June or around July and August, and so that you get the right amount of time for maturing. But some of the things that occur on growing pumpkin, they're not that particular on the soil, but they like a good organic soil, kind of moisture retentive. They like that, and they really do stand up good in the heat. Sugar pie, the one we're growing, is a great one, and it's good for cooking. Anything you want to, you can make soup out of it, all kinds of things. There's just a million things to make out of it, and it's easy. And but you need some room, definitely need some room. And you need pollinators, because you have male and female flower. I did post on my website that pictures of the differences of the flowers. And you have to, if you don't have pollinators, you're gonna have to pollinate yourself. If you want a pollinators, if you're growing, gourds or some melons or cucumbers or zucchini, you need to have pollinators because it's male and female flower. And oftentimes, the low bee supply and the fact that the pumpkin flower is underneath the leaf, it's not predominant, it's underneath the leaves. What is the best pollinator attractors and that will make your vegetable garden a lot easier is blue fortune, agastaches. And I've never seen one of those without bees on it. You can buy them, and sometimes you can buy them at a local nursery. They do grow those. It's called blue fortune, and you plant two or three of those in your vegetable garden or in your perennial garden. They make beautiful flower, and they drop seeds, and they'll be there year after year after year. And the bees just love that plant. They'll be all over it. The porcelain vine is another plant with very small, not descript, very nondescript flowers. But the bees I've never seen a porcelain vine without bees on it. It's a remarkable. That you'd have to buy online. So there's tracking the pollinators if you're going to be growing those type of crops, cucumbers, melons, zucchini, squash, gourds. That would be, your best bet. But in case, if you didn't want to, have fruit drop, a lot of times if you don't have pollination, your fruit or your zucchini will drop. And that's a sign that you're not getting pollination. And then, so you need to know what your male and female flower look like. And I won't go into the botany of it, but looking at your female flower, it's going to be, usually it's going to be larger. It depends on the type of plant it is, but it's going to be larger. And then it's going to have a blunt center. The little things in the center are going to be blunt looking. and the male is going to be a long cone shape. And so you could use your finger, or you could use a Q-tip, or you could use a paintbrush. And all you need to do is get the male and also the female flower. You'll notice behind the flower is kind of a bulbous or a immature fruit, very small, and it's not going to be behind the male flower. Okay. So that's the fruit, the beginning of the fruit. Okay. So very simple. It's not, you don't have to brainstorm to figure this out. But just get some pollen on your finger, and then touch the female part and in the center of the plant. And you just go to do that in the morning. In the morning is your best time to do it because all the flowers are open in the morning. And or get a paintbrush. Paintbrush, you can really get down in there and make sure you're 100% effective, or a Q-tip. And once you touch a male flower, you could, reload yourself with some more pollen and go through there. And you're going to have pollination. Okay. And then you'll notice that as the time progresses, that after the flower folds, the immature fruit will start getting bigger and bigger, and it won't drop. And good water, you'll need good water. Now, if you want volume, if you want a lot of pumpkins, then you don't have to thin out, you know. But if you want to grow the monster pumpkin, if let's say you want to have if you have a fall crop, you want to have one of those huge jack-lanterns you could drive a car into. Yeah, but you want to thin the fruit down, to about one or two, and then so all that energy is going to be devoted to creating that one pumpkin. But if you want a lot of, a generous amount of crop, you give away to your friends because you'll have plenty to give away. And of course, it's easier to store. You're going to have what, 200-pound pumpkin or 100-pound, 50-pound pumpkin. But not to say the sugar pie will get that size. Some of them, there's a huge variety. There's sugar pie, there's a blue lake, there's all kinds of them. Pumpkin. So, but sugar pie is good for cooking and eating. But then once you bring them in, they'll store well if you especially if you're applying trace elements to a plant or a crop that as you're growing it, it makes a huge difference. There's actually, when a farmer takes his crops or tries to sell his crops, the people who purchase them, of course, they want to know what the shelf life is of any type of vegetable crop that they purchase. And they all look the same. You can't tell the difference. But the ones that are treated with trace elements, there's a distinct difference. Distinct difference, because normally a crop or a vegetable that you grow, and it's in high quality, it's got because it's been treated with trace elements, it doesn't rot. It just desiccates. And for someone who's transporting crops, and you want the pumpkin or the tomato to have a high shelf life, they want those type of crops. And basically they are a tell of what kind of nutrients that are available in the crop for the end user, and also that they're grown on healthy plants, so that's going to provide all the things. It's kind of an interesting thing when you're thinking about vegetables that probably didn't know that they actually pay more, or buyers pay more. They want to know what is the shelf life, and they put a test on them, and they'll pay more for those that have a shorter shelf life. So when you're growing your crops, like say potatoes and onions and squash, pumpkin, that if you're treating them with trace elements as it's growing and maturing, you're able to get more shelf life, storage for these types of vegetables. And they're worth more. They're going to provide more because they are more nutrient loaded. But anyway, on pumpkins, the when you get done cooking one and harvesting the seed, of course, you can store the seed, to be zero cost, basically, besides a little bit of fertilizer. Uh, yeah, I couldn't believe we paid $20 for a pumpkin, or $15 for one. But The seed's very easy to store. Just dry it out and put it out on, keep it out of the sun, let it dry. Uh, and once it gets really dry, put it in wrap it in a piece of paper and put it in a small plastic bag and put it in the refrigerator. And also, you can roast the pumpkin seeds. A lot of people eat pumpkin seeds. They're full of all kinds of great nutrient value food, and uh, and it's a fun thing to grow. But the only thing you're going to need, one of the things you're going to need is a little space because it is amazing how big that vine gets. It's a big vine, so you'll need some good space. But you'll have I think the pumpkin that we have already, we've got probably 25 fruit. 25 fruit already, and it's still growing. It's a young vine. I mean, we planted it in. I think we started out in first of March. That's when we started out on. It weathered a couple cold nights, but it really didn't affect it all that much. And good water, it needs good water, but it can take the sun all day long. It's not going to wilt down. And this one's a little more resistant. We haven't had any squash borers or anything. So if you've had problems with squash borers and you just really can't get the nutrients right to make them resistant, you can always take some BT, which is it's a bacteria, in a small syringe. It's completely harmless to us. It's a bacteria you can in right at the base of the plant. You can inject the bacteria into the plant, and it will circulate through the plant. It was completely harmless to the plant, completely harmless to us. This is if you're growing cucumbers or any of those squash borers, get it on in your plant, and you won't have to use insecticide. And what it does is that's the insect reacts, the stomach of the insect reacts bad to it and kills it immediately. So it has a malfunction in that area. But it's very easy, low cost. All you need is a small syringe right at the base of the plant, right where it's emerging from the soil. You want to get your needle, mix it up in just a little bit of water, make sure it's fully solubilized, and inject it into the plant. Or how to grow your own pumpkins. It's a fun crop to grow. It's getting the watermelon started. This too is our next step. And we're trying to make our selection. We really had some the Alabama watermelon from actually dates back to the Persian Empire was one of the probably is getting in the top list of the best watermelon. Easy to grow, and it's not a huge vine. But anyway, we're thinking about other things that we could grow during this season. And cucumbers, is a spring crop. It really doesn't do well in our temperature zone during the summer, but there's substitutes and that grow in love 95, degree weather, hot, humid. There's the Armenian footlong. It's a melon, but it tastes similar to cucumber, and it's kind of unusual. Looks kind of like a cucumber, but a little unusual shape, light green. And there's the Axongura melon cucumber too. And these are you could use them to substitute for cucumbers when the temperature gets hot, and they'll laugh at the weather, no problem. And it is a little unusual to have a foot long cucumber, but they're tasty and easy to grow. But we're going to get started on those next. As soon as we run to that pumpkin thing, it takes up a lot of room. So we got a little reduced space there, but in the garden, we've been working on our perennial beds. We do the maintenance on those. If you like perennial gardening, but you don't want to do maintenance, we're the experts on the maintenance. And some of the plants that are really performing well this time of the year are the drift roses. And drift roses, if they're treated well, if they're, fertilized well in spring, trace elements, Miracle Grow rose fertilizer, and what else we use on them? Lots of fish emulsion, humic acid, fulmic acid, and seaweed. And if you get those in a little bit of mill organite, those are the combination. They will really perform well. I mean, there's going to be a huge difference in the drift rose that doesn't get those elements in it, and versus the ones that does. We like we were in our gardens or in the landscapes we maintain, the drift roses look spectacular from March all the way to December, the first frost. They still look good. We, we've looked at all the different types of drift roses. We've grown all different types, and some are better than others. The red is a weak grower for our climate zone. It may grow well in Minnesota, but it doesn't grow well in our zone, the high heat. The white drift, it's not, it will, no, they all grow, okay, but if you're going to plant something, you want it to look, really good. The sweet drift, which is a pink variety, that's a beautiful vigorous bush, and it has boxwood-like perfection on the foliage. None of our drift roses really ever get black spot. They don't really have leaf drop like, a lot of drift. If you're getting those trace elements on them, roses that we're growing in our border, whether it be English roses, hybrid tea roses, drift roses, they are not getting any more black spot. I mean, we looked at black spot on maybe I saw one spot on one English rose that we had. So by following this trace element thing, it really makes a gigantic difference, not a little bit, a gigantic difference of how your roses are going to look and how they're going to perform in the middle of summer and whether they're going to drop every single leaf because of black spot. The number one, of course, we talked about the coral. The coral has a good bush. It's a moderate grower. That would be kind of a three, that'd be number three on the scale, 1 to 5. And then the number one is going to be the apricot. That thing produces a lot of flowers. Has a great looking bush. We have a cluster of them, must have at least 500 flowers on it. Flower buds get ready to bloom, and it really does well. That would be a top performer. Peach is another top performer. So apricot and the peach, if you want a good looking bush and flowers, a really vigorous growing bush, the sweet drift, the white is weak, the red is weak, the coral is a good bush. It's not going to produce that many flowers. And there's a new variety that's actually got nominated as a rose of the year. One of the roses of the year is called the buttercream drift rose. It's a new variety out there. And the lemon and the pink, another one they have. The pink I know is not that great. The lemon, it's okay. They're okay. They're just not that great. When you consider them with the other varieties. So add drift roses into your landscape for great color all season long. Your Shamar's oak or, growing vegetables. Vegetables are, a great thing to grow with the cost of produce, paying $20, got my purchase of a lemon tree when lemons were $1 a piece. I said, forget it. I'm buying a lemon tree. And we got one growing. Persimmon's a great, easy fruit. That's the easiest of all the trees I've ever grown, fruit trees. Persimmon is the easiest one to grow. And if you try to buy one, persimmon during at, local grocery store, Publix, whatever it be, and they're like, $3 a piece, which is a lot of money for a piece of, so grow your own persimmon, and and it's a beautiful tree. Our persimmons are loaded with fruit, and I've seen them for 30 or 40 years growing in abandoned lots and just in sand and not even getting irrigated and still producing fruit, which is amazing. But we were talking about roses, but the how to really grow a great rose. And roses are, give you that eternal color. They'll bloom pretty much all season long. They will slow down a little bit in the high summer let's say between July and August. But if you're keeping them fertilized, they will slow down less. And as soon as it cools down, they'll have a second spring. The first flush, of course, in spring is good. And then, they'll have, if you deadhead, they don't really need to be deadheaded, but they'll have a sequence of other flushes of flowers. And then slows down a little bit, maybe in the middle of summer, and then they'll start. But drift rose is a good rose. I'm not, of course, everybody loved the knockout rose originally. That's the best knockout roses are going to, of course, be the red. They have many different colors, the red, pink. They've really developed it. They need a good shearing to help them along. They get by the end of the season, they get extended in growth. But I think the drip rose, the oh so easy, another variety is called the oh so easy, one of those small, compact landscape roses, which produces a lot of flowers. More along the lines of, they've probably hybridized it with more antique or heirloom roses where they produce a great amount of color. But following those trace elements, you're going to have great results. They can go into containers. We have a couple rose trees that are English roses, and they make great containers. And if you want fragrance, they're very fragrant. English roses will produce a lot of fragrance. They what English roses separate English roses out from, let's say, hybrid teas or floribundas or all the other varieties of different tea roses or anything, is that they really concentrated, when they were hybridizing flowers for color and for shape, they lost the fragrance. But well, this guy, David Austin, really concentrated on making them back to what they were, more of an antique and improving their varieties. But we've had great success by following those guidelines. You can always grow some of the antique varieties. Docher is a great one. Of course, they there's just so many. There's just so many of antique varieties that grow well. They're just not going to produce the great flowers as the new hybridized varieties. But so give roses instead of maybe Ilex shilling, you can plant a band of drift roses. If you wanted to take a little bit more time, you could add a little bit more compost to that soil, but they'll grow in sandy soil. They'll grow in sandy soil just like if you did nothing besides just put them in the ground and grow in sandy soil. They do need a little more water, and to get them to bloom. And speaking of water, it's amazing, when we've made turn common Bermuda into lawns. I've turned common Bermuda into lawns. What has happened that clients call me and says, listen, I've got this 1 acre of lawn and it's almost all the St. Augustine's died because of take-all root rot, various different reasons, and he didn't want to replant it. And then common Bermuda invaded, and we've turned those into lawns. And I'm telling you, Bermuda right now is king. I mean, we work in one place we have really, I don't think we watered the lawn more than once, and it's still green looking. Bermuda can take this brutal drought. Bermuda could go for another, without a drop of water, it could probably go another 90 days without a drop of water. It's not going to look the best. It will turn a little bit of brown, but it will survive the drought, especially common Bermuda. We're talking about roots that gets 3 to 4 feet deep. And as soon as it rains again, boom. And the great thing about common Bermuda, versus Bahia, it doesn't have all those seed heads. And a common Bermuda that has not been mowed for 3 weeks will probably be ankle height. Well, you don't mow Bahia for 3 weeks. It's going to be tall. It's going to be 12 inches, tall. So you don't have to mow it as frequently. So I don't exactly know why Bahia took off and common Bermuda did. Because common Bermuda, in my opinion, if you have a rural area and you're using Bahia, that common Bermuda is superior in every way. You reduce your mowing, it reseeds, it needs less water than Bahia. It's just if you're growing up, if you have livestock, maybe it's more foliage, more fodder. But the common Bermuda, you could make it into a decent looking lawn. If you fertilized your common Bermuda, it doesn't like a lot of nitrogen, a little bit of nitrogen, trace elements, and then things like fish emulsion, mill organite, and to create that great environment, little bacteria in there, mow it, scalp it down low. You got to scalp it down low, and then let it grow out and keep it mowed low. It really turns it a beautiful. It's more on the blue green. It's a good looking lawn, and with little or no water. You don't. If you had common Bermuda, if you had a let's say you had a rural area or whatever, or even a house, you would never have to irrigate it. It would never die from not having irrigation in our zone. I guess if you lived in Arizona, it may, but not here where we're getting 59 inches of rain a year, even though we are in a drought phase, which is typical of a continental climate. We have modified continental climate, dry springs and wet summers. So, but if you're thinking about planting grass, you don't want to really spend a lot of time on watering it. Calmer Bermuda, you have to change the way you think of grass when you're planting Calmer Bermuda, because normally people if you've been raised up around St. Augustine, you've always had St. Augustine. St. Augustine likes a lot of nitrogen. It likes good amount of water. Those things that you normally would do to St. Augustine, you would be negative on Bermuda and zoysia. Bermuda, zoysia, and past palm don't like a lot of nitrogen. So you don't have those heavy loads of nitrogen on your grass, but you have to pay more close attention to the trace elements, making sure the trace elements are good, and you have those organic things in the soil, and you're going to have a great looking Bermuda lawn and never have to water it. It won't look as good when it's not watered, okay? But it will survive 90 days, longer than that. Maybe not. Like I say, you don't have to in the spring. If you don't water from spring to the winter, it doesn't need to. It will live. It will live, and it's not a problem. Just to really get it to look good, though, you're gonna have to really mow low. To really mow low. So that's the negative. That would uh, that would be more challenging with a rotary mower. The rotary mower mows the ideally calmer Bermuda should be mowed at about a half an inch to 3/4 inch. Ideally. And so that's what a reel mower would come in handy. The old kind of spinning turbines, they used to, what we used to have mow lawns when I was a kid. Can't believe I used to mow the lawn with a reel mower. How did I do that? Back and push for 3 steps forward, but come back, push. It took forever. But, so if you're thinking about starting out on a lawn project, and you really want it to be durable in this drought, you never have to worry about whether it's going to die. It's more disease resistant, more bug resistant. Common Bermuda, make it it is going to be, now if it turns cold, it can brown out a little more easier, but it springs right back. Think about common Bermuda if that's what you're thinking about putting a lawn in. You want it to be a little more easy on you. But in the perennial gardens that we're talking so much about perennial gardens because we're developing a couple of them that are, doing well. And some of the things that look really great right now in perennial gardens, if you're just starting out and you think you want to try a perennial garden, I would think I would devote more time looking at fall blooming perennials. First, be your first step, fall blooming perennials. And that really what that does is that it helps you keep things neat during the summer. It's going to be hard for you as you start out. You determine which plants are going to stay neat all the time. So spring bloomers, you know, there's a huge amount of spring bloomers, but anybody can garden when the temperature is 75. Anybody. But how do you do it when it's 95 and make it look nice? In 95 for month after month. That's the thing. So if you devote yourself to understanding fall bloomers, you're going to be in good shape. And then you can mix in a few spring bloomers. And what's looking good right now is a spring bloom for fill in that gap is Verbena bonarensis, and guara is looking good. And then rudbeckia, some of the early blooming rudbeckias called there's some dwarfs that are early bloomer, early sunrise, I believe the variety that's going. The stokesia asters are starting to bloom, and but it's as it's going. It was just zero. The whole thing was like at soil level. That you see all these perennials are coming up out of zero, and they're filling the garden bed, which is around 100 linear feet. Now it's about 100 linear feet and 25 feet wide, And then we use, and to fill in some of the gaps in the spring, of course, we use azaleas. We use Satsuki azaleas. We insert some of those, and then we use some flowering trees, the fringe tree. We use the red bud. All those trees can be your spring interest, and your summer, mid or late spring, early summer interest. It's great to have some place to come out in the landscape, and or your garden, perennial garden, because it's going to, evokes positive emotions. I just wrote down all the things. It invokes interest in things that are not, as the world's rushing by in a hurry. You can take, it's interesting to watch them, nature as it moves through the process of the seasons. You know, uh, it's really strange, when we go to these landscapes and we create these perennial gardens, how much the whole atmosphere changes in the landscape. Getting things, growing your own vegetables and, having a beautiful perennial garden, they're definitely worth growing. And, I'm just thinking, the whole atmosphere of the backyard's changed. It's more invigorated with life. You got birds coming in now, the bees, the butterflies, it goes from that sterile grass environment, and shrubs it comes alive. And you get, when you're sitting there, and I've noticed that, some of the clients they really enjoy being outside now, sitting out in the patio and moving through the landscape and enjoying it. Invokes curiosity, creates beauty, interest. It is just lots of things when you see an active garden. So, what I mean by active, when you're having some of the benefits of perennial gardening or having a flowering garden, is that when you drive up, it's always the same. You have the edging, the variety, the ilex shilling, the ligustrum. That looks the same every day. Okay, there's a little bit of change in there. Well, when the perennial garden we planted, let me see now, just planted 500 perennials. And so the sum total of the total plants, I'm just take a quick, all right, 25. It's getting close to almost 3,500 perennials. So it's a lot. It's a lot. So those, it's a big, you don't have to do it at that scale, but the all those little individual plants are changing and transforming through the year, going from zero ground level, or opening up and changing, growing, and then flowering, and then going through the next season of cold weather, and then down, and then, it's very interesting to watch, as you could mark out each part of the season. Also, you can always add annuals. Annuals are a good way to give color in the spring. And you want your self-seeding annuals like calendula, larkspur, phlox. You can spread some of those seeds. And once you spread them in there, all you have to do is thin them out, and every year they'll return with good fertilization and good care. So there's a lot of benefits and enjoyment in having your own perennial garden. And not only do you do not have to have a dedicated perennial garden, but you're using perennials in the landscape. You're not going to have to be resorting to like Rudbeckia, echinacea, coneflower. You can put them in the front, back, and of your borders, your shrub borders, and they can grow, and then they'll thrive, and then they'll go into winter. And you'll not be stressed out with having, well, we're going to plant this year. And there's a lot of good native perennials. We use some of our native perennials in our zone, and use some from other parts of the United States, that have similar weather patterns. One of the great ones that looks absolutely section of the landscape. Heard we talk about it the last couple of weeks, and still looks great. And it's looked great now for over a month, and it will continue to look great for probably, where it's at its peak flowering, probably another 60 days. So it's still long lasting, and it's guara, it's a whirling butterfly, and our probably longer than that, because the Iridium are going to bloom next. And so we're talking about 6 months of interest, and absolutely perfect to be in. Low humidity, good temperature, light and breezy. Mother Nature is alive now, and great of the year to be outside. More coffee, But if you're starting on a garden project and you have interest in perennial garden or Chamards oaks or how to make a pave or driveway or build a pergola, archway, irrigation, we'd love to have your question. Invite you to call us if you're thinking about starting out on a new project or if you're having a problem keeping the grass green or anything related to gardening or landscaping. But we are going to talk about deer resistance. Deer resistance. People who, I mean, when you're driving out in the perimeter of the city, the more rural areas, there's so many deer, and the people who love to garden out there, it's a tough place to be. A lot of times you just have to build a barrier. It's got to be about 10 feet tall. Keep deer out, electric fence, all kinds of things. Once they get determined to get in there, one thing, deer really love hibiscus and they really love roses. I just don't understand how they could munch down on a rose bush, but they do. They got some tough mouths. But I have written down a list of, as you're going to Home Depot, Lowe's, your local garden center, picking out some plants to plant in the landscape that the deer, flowers that the deer don't like. A lot of times, I go to these even I would consider them in the city, but they may have a wild area next door, and the deer just massacre the landscape. You plant it out, the next morning it's gone. But some things that are very deer resistant, we're going to go to lavender is a great plant to plant. The deer absolutely hate that, and I call that a barrier plant because once a lavender gets planted, the deer don't like the smell. So they just basically stay away from that. And so that's a good thing about it. So you can plant something behind it, rosemary and lavender. They do not like the smell of that. So once you plant that on the border, they're not going to munch on it and they're going to leave things behind it away. Now, if they discover by chance that something's good back there, they'll go back there. Salvia are very deer resistant. The deer don't like the taste. They have a pungent odor. They very aromatic. Salvias are very aromatic. Deer don't like them. Marigold is put that on the top of the list. Deer absolutely hate them, and bugs don't like them. So they're kind of a bug retardant. But we'll take a moment in the break. We're going to go to Jay. He has a question about his olive tree. Hello, Jay. Good morning. Well, depends on the type of olive tree. Some of the olive trees are going to be, don't need pollinator. And if you probably bought, where did you buy that olive tree at? It's well, it could be the age too. They usually before they start fruiting, it's going to be about 6 years. 6 or 7 years, and plus you just transplanted it. But more than likely, you're going to have our Beck Queen is the variety that is sold in our area, and it is a self pollinator. But if you could get another olive, a Mission olive or Arbosiana olive, that will help the tree have a greater yield. And you can get them online. I'm going to spell them out to you because I'm terrible on pronunciation. It's Arbosan, and Mission. Of course, that was easy. And these are going to help the production of the fruit because when you have even though it's self-pollinating, like figs are self-pollinating, when you have pollination, you have the fruit are much more vigorous. And then, once you get the fruit, it's a little bit of. Have you read of the process, Jay, of how to cure your olives and how to process them? Yeah, yeah, that will be another project for you. It's a little bit of process. Well, you never know, Jay. You might be turned into an olive farmer from Georgia. The wife might have started something in you. You know what I mean? Yeah, just it's a good time to order them online. You can get them online. You're not going to get them usually at a garden center, but go online and get them. They'll mail them to you and plant them right out. Okay. Thanks for the call. All right. Sure. Yeah, great. That's great. Olive trees are beautiful. Ads It's just trees too, because they're evergreen. Now, I'm originally from California. We had olive trees lining everywhere, up and down the neighborhood. And I wasn't in love with them because it became, they producing so many olives are all over the ground everywhere, everywhere. And they make a little purple stain. As kids, we were throwing them at them, slingshotting them at each other, it's but there was olive trees everywhere up and down the street. They're a beautiful tree. If you have uh, the go to Italy and you see some of the olive trees, olive farms there, groves, and they're spectacular when they get to be, 50 to 100 years old. They just, they create that unbelievable gnarled looking trunk, as good looking as a weeping Japanese maple. A 100-year, 50-year-old olive tree is a great looking tree. And we were talking about plants that are really resistant to deer, flowering plants that you can plant, or annuals that you can plant. You don't have to worry about the deer. The deer won't, plant out one day, get them all planted, get them a little bit of miracle grow on them. It's looking beautiful. You go to bed and then you wake up next morning and they're gone. The deer have their deer poop the next morning, But zinnias is another great deer resistant flower. They have they're very most this is not the complete list, but if they're really strongly aromatic, like a lot fragrant, but even fragrant, that they don't deer don't like jasmine, because if it's strongly fragrant, that's a good indication it could be deer resistant. And kind of like aromatic, like salvia. If you smell salvia or rosemary, has that strong aromatic fragrance, that would be a good indication. So ageratum is another plant that is you'll see them in the store right now as an annual in the garden centers. Waxed begonias, and if you're in a shade area, they don't like begonia, and that's a very dependable disease resistant plant. Bee balm is a perennial and it's a native plant too. And if you're an Indian, if you're using native plants, bee balm is a very disease resistant. I used to think Rudbeckia was, but those deer, it's they you always use when they're talking about deer resistant. They don't say deer proof, because I mean a deer, that's amazing. They get hungry enough, they'll nibble on anything. Coneflower, Echinacea purpurea is very deer resistant. And one plant I've never really seen deer eat is Gaillardia, and that's a native plant in all different cultivars. It's a nice yellow flower, and needs low amount of fertilizer and doesn't like a lot of irrigation. If you want to grow it I'll keep it in growing all season long. You can plant it as an annual, load up on the fertilizer, really blooms prolifically, fertilize it, overwater it, and it will kick out at around, it's finished in around July or August. Or you can keep it on a lean diet and low amount of water, and it will make it through the summer and produce flowers all summer long. I would suggest, if you like Gaillardia, which is a good plant, that you buy a cultivar, a hybridized version, because they can produce some serious amount of flowers, and they're not slowed down either. So they'll once they bud, if you deadhead, maybe other once a week, and or once every 2 weeks, they'll flower pretty much all summer long. And there'll be a little bit of pause in the heat, but they'll go on and on and on. So there's some great candidates if you're searching for those doggone deer. Like keeping those doggone deer away from your house and keeping them from demolishing your landscape. I went to I went to a place, a lady had just planted all of her client's house, and she was telling me she was planting all of her plants outside, and planted her petunias are pretty deer resistant too. But she planted everything outside, looked great, and woke up the next morning and it was all gone. So she was kind of a little disgusted. So if you live in a deer zone, if you're planting shrubbery or you're planting flowers, it's always worth your time to look up what is deer resistance versus, finding out the hard way because it's kind of expensive once you get that going. You haven't figured it out. So this year, I'm going to, I've ordered some more falling water cypress, bald cypress, and I'm going to make a falling water fence. And we were talking about having natural fences. It's, pleat trees. You could use that, the pollard, espalier, Belgian fence. You can make a natural fence out of plants. And trees is a great candidate. You can bend them over. And the reason we're going to use falling water as a great candidate for a living fence, even though it's going to be deciduous, is that its branches are very, very soft and you can tie them together and then during the summer, it's going to look green. And you cut the central leader out and tie the branches together, and it will create a kind of a willow. If you've been to England, they make fences out of willow. It will have that kind of structure. If you keep spreading them out horizontal, getting your grass looking good. But we're going to go to, we want to also, we're going to go to Rick, and we want to answer his question about sandy soil, which grass is for sandy soil. Hello, Rick. Doing great, doing great. Sandy soil, that's always produce, what the thing is, sandy soil is what obstacles does it create? It creates a low nutrient value because it does not have the ability to hold nutrients, and especially when a lot of the nutrients are water soluble. And some grasses and some plants are adapt to those conditions. And one of the best ones was going to be Bermuda. Bermudas love sandy soil. St. Augustine can grow in sandy soil because it grows in the beach, but Bermuda is going to be the most adapted to just pure sand. We heard me talking at the beginning of the hour maybe about just growing common Bermuda, and you can make a beautiful lawn out. And so to really get Bermuda started, one of the great things about Bermuda is it can seed, where you can't seed St. Augustine. So if you have a damaged area, you can just throw some Bermuda seed out there, and you can get it grow from seed. So that's a good thing. Um, a lot of people. No, no, I would just barely rake, to rough up the surface, put the seed on there. What I normally do is just in case we have a lot of rain, we're not having any now, but I put a little bit of straw or pine straw over it, and that will slow down the water from hitting it, and causing it to erode. But so Bermuda's it. Of course, centipede will grow, but St. Augustine grows in sand, but it does need more water. It does need more nutrients. And how you can make sandy soil into a clay with soil with more clay is adding more organic material. So mill organite is always a good additive to sandy soil. Increasing the percent organic material in the soil. So that will help you grow grass without having to continually add fertilizer, continually add a lot of water to it. But Bermuda, like I said in the beginning of the hour, if you had common Bermuda planted and you planted it by seed and is well established, if you never turn the irrigation on ever again, it would not kill the grass. I don't care if it didn't rain for 90 days, not one drop, it's not going to die. So that's pretty amazing. I love sandy soil. It's the best, the Bermuda would be the top grass in sandy soil. All right? All right. Thank you very much. Thanks. Have a great day. Yeah. One of the things about, of course, I'm bringing all the virtues of Bermuda, but one of the great things about Bermuda, you can get it started with seed. You know what I mean? It starts with seed. And a lot of Bermuda grass seed that you buy will be a blend of several different types. So they'll have their trademark blend. And so you'll have different layers of color and also of height. But it's the greatest thing, if you have it reseeds itself every year. If you'll see these little, if you don't mow, you'll see these little seed heads coming up, and it just drops all the seed. And if you have Bermuda, if you've ever had Bermuda grass in any flower bed, you know what I'm talking about. It's hard to get rid of it. It's very difficult to get rid of it, but So sandy soil, Bermuda's gonna love it. But, we're talking about living fences and, using, bald cypress or dwarf bald cypress like, there's a couple different pea minaret, cutting the central leader out. You can plant the trees in a line and just bend the branches over and as lateral, or horizontal units, tie them together, and actually they will form that shape, and that's a living fence, and all you have to do is prune, trim, and, better than ligustrum, you can, do a Belgian fence with it. You can use a Belgian fence. Belgian fence is a fence where trees are kind of espalier, they form a shape, and they're overlapped. There's that music again. This is the Home and Garden Show with Larry's Garden Landscape and Design. We'll be right back with you. More great garden talk. Your pergola, anything green or starting to turn brown, if you need help on that, or if you're starting on an outdoor project, we'd invite you to call us at 855 765 1045. 855 765 for drought right now, and it's important our plants and our landscape good water, and it's important for us, when we're working out there. And the experts on water are affordable water. If you wanted a drinking water supply, get in your own home and paying a reasonable amount. I think, drinking water, if you figure out what you're paying for a gallon, could be, $60 a gallon if you're buying that high end stuff. And, get a drinking water system installed in your house. If you were thinking about, making your clothes cleaner, your appliances to work longer, a soft water system. If you have one and you need it repaired, affordable water, decades and decades of experience and working on the equipment that has been abandoned by the installers, and you don't know who to help. And also the stuff they install, they love made in America, affordable water. You want to give them a call at 904 262-0197. 904-262-0197. Also, if you have well water and you're wondering what am I drinking, and or how to improve the quality of it, 904-262-0197. Affordable water. But the garden is cranking up right now. And if you'd like to take another something that's a shot at vegetable garden, and you can grow pole beans, and pole beans love the heat. And a lot of times, we can't grow some crops here during our summers because of the oppressive heat we get in the high humidity. But pole beans, they're one of the easiest ones to grow. You got a fence, there you are. There's a location. Pole beans versus bush beans. Pole beans are more of a viner. They need more room. Bush beans are going to be, low, more like a bush. And I think that bush beans are going to be a little more prone to diseases versus pole beans. But they have the Chinese red, which is a beautiful bean, unusual. I like to have unusual looking vegetable crops. It's a bright red, easy to grow. What do pole beans need for growing? Just something to grow on, of course. And they, a little bit of compost around them, if you could do that. A little bit of fertilizer, Miracle-Gro grows fertilizer on them, and some little bit of fish emulsion. They're pretty much not that picky, not that picky, and you'll have a good crop in about 95 days, and plenty to store, and plenty to you only need one or two plants. Pole beans. The Here's a kind of an unusual bean called the Chinese spiral. And the reason it's unusual, it's a pole bean too, but it grows kind of in a spiral shape and naturally without any training. The taste is very unusual, very much like popcorn. So if you're having problem getting your kids to eat beans, try the Chinese spiral. Popcorn, put a little butter and popcorn on it. Some of the other varieties that will grow good is the Contender, is a good variety. The Provider and Blue Lake. During the hotter times of the year, make sure, with hotter, droutier times, make sure they get steady water when they're in production. They're one of the easiest beans to grow. Of course, lime beans are another one, easy to grow. Christmas is a very unusual lime bean. It has It's actually when you open up the bean, it's gonna be red and white, or a really bright red and white, originally from Peru. But, beans are, everybody loves beans, you can use them in any kind of a cooking, chilies, you could grow all of every kind of bean will grow in our climate. So they're extremely easy to grow, and you can even grow them, bush beans in containers if you're and you can grow the pole bean in a container, just need the support on that. But, give it a shot. You'll once you start growing your own and you've had success in it, if you, if you a lot of times people get discouraged on the first time because they have a failure. That's what we're here for, help you get you steered in the right direction. They do need full sun, but once you get hooked on it, you've had some success in certain areas, then you wanna expand on it. It's hard to stop. But when you're thinking about, walking around the landscape and thinking how I can really improve the curb appeal if I'm selling the house or if I really wanted to be more inviting when I drive up, what are some of the basic things that I could do to really improve the curb appeal? And of course, always adding a specimen tree to the landscape always improves the curb appeal. Whether it be a flowering tree is your best bet, a Japanese maple, any type of specimen tree, not a big tree, but a specimen tree is adds a lot to the landscape. I mean, when I'm just driving around, I'm always looking at a you know a Japanese maple plant in the front yard or a flowering tree. Always attracts the attention of the person who's driving by. The other thing you could do to really improve the overall curb appeal of your landscape, a pretty simple fix, is border edging. And you could use just if you want it to be plain, you can use this landscape metal and it keeps the edge straight. But if you wanted to add another element, of course, you could use brick edging, you could use a paver edge. You could get 12 by, or 12s or 18 by 18s and lay a paver edge around the border, uh, 24 by 24. You almost have a walkway, you have a place if you're sit and work, if you're working on your landscape. That really is a sharp look. The paver edging. We've done some of those before. That's where you take a 24 by 24 paver and you cut it out and you edge the whole edge of the landscape border. That is really good looking. Of course, they have concrete edging. I'm not a big fan of that, but it looks more industrial. But in a commercial application, it looks great. If you want a more industrial look, maybe a modern garden, a window box. I know it's always a struggle to keep them watered, but you could hook it up to your irrigation system and just put a couple of emitters in there with a window box really adds a lot of interest, especially if you have a more classic style home, a window box. And you don't necessarily have to plant plants that need a lot of water. You can use succulents and dwarf cactuses in there and some plants that can go on zero, just rainfall. But we're going to go to Barbara. She has questions about her tomatoes. Hello, Barbara. Good morning. You have? Okay. Okay, you like the cherry tomatoes. The thing with tomatoes is that you have to have good sunlight on them. And so if you're having a struggle, I first check the sunlight. Make sure they're getting at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. And then the next thing is if you're growing them, are you growing them in containers, Barbara? Okay, plant them in the ground. The cherry, yeah, which is good. The cherry tomatoes or the small tomatoes are really can produce fruit all throughout the year. I've never really had any problems getting the smaller tomatoes, the cherry tomatoes, to not produce fruit. But get them in a sunny place. Make sure the soil is drained. I would get some planting mix. Planting mix. You can go to Miracle Grow planting mix. That will put a combination of those organic elements in there. And it's still time to start with seed. If you still want to start with seed, you can go to Rare Seeds or any Johnny Seed or Select Seed and get a type that you like. But they have Sweet 100s is a very common variety that you can get. Sweet 100 Bonnie plants have Sweet 100s, and Once you plant the tomato, when you're planting the tomato, you want to tease the roots apart a little bit, gently tease the roots apart, put it in the ground, and then you want to get a little bit of Miracle Grow tomato fertilizer, make it easy, and fish emulsion. And that should be the combination that should get you going in the right direction. Okay. You need the sun. Okay. Well, if you have any problem, Barbara, you can always call me at during the week, 904-346-1970. We'll get you started. Sun, and then you'll need a bamboo stake also because those smaller tomatoes, the sweet 100s, or you're going, those black cherry tomatoes, they'll need a stake, a little small bamboo stake right next to it. You can tie it up with. All right. Good luck on your tomatoes. Okay. All right. Yeah, great. Have a great day. But those cherry tomatoes are great in salads. And one thing about those cherry tomatoes, which there's all kinds of them out there. I like Brad's Atomic, and that's another one you got to start with seed. And but Berry's Crazy is another variety that they produce, and they're great in salads. So they're not so much weight that you have to worry about the staking of other tomatoes. And once you get them staked up, they're good. But good water, good fertilizer. Miracle Grow, for the easiest way to do it, Miracle Grow provides enough calcium, so they don't get a bottom blossom rot, which always is a big issue on it. But we're going back to how to create curb appeal on your landscape. So one or two elements that you can really make it interesting. A window box, a window seal box, and you can make it out of pressure treated wood and mount. There's several different ways you can mount it directly to the wood, or have a support unit where you can pick it up, move it off to support units underneath it, and you set it in place. You can make your own window box, or you can purchase them. There's plenty of companies that make them, and you can use the succulents, like I said. The weeping kind of a creeping type of hanging over plant would be petunias, alyssum. If you have pink bubblegum petunia, if you have an opportunity to get that, that's the best petunia for that, and it will flower all summer long. And guara, there's a pink guara that stays compact. So those are going to be drought resistant. So you could go away and not water them for 3 or 4 days. They may wilt down, but they're not going to die. You could use, if you have it in a shade area, you can use bromeliads. Bromeliads never need to be watered, never need to be watered. So you could put some dwarf bromeliad in there, and they're going to be the leaves are going to be more beautiful in color, where they do flower. There's some spectacular looking bromeliads that flower well. That's our music again. This is the Home and Garden Show with Larry's Garden Landscape and Design. We'll be right back we'll start on a vegetable garden. We'll give you some hints on that, growing those warm weather crops. There's a lot of substitutes. If you can't grow cucumbers, you can grow these melon type plants, the Armenian yard long for cucumbers, the Exline gourd or melon, which is a cucumber substitute. So don't have to give up on vegetable garden during the high summer if you want to have a vegetable crop growing your own. It's very expensive to buy vegetables nowadays. It's incredible, and for a small pack of seeds, around $3. And then once you get your seeds, just save, and save some of them, and you're on the road next year for free, and learning how to compost and to do those things. So reduce the amount of fertilizer. But we're talking about how to really improve the overall look of the curb appeal. Of course, emphasizing the front door, emphasizing the entrance. If your walkway to your house is 2.5 feet wide, that's a complete failure. Yes, it furnishes a way to walk, but it's not applicable to having a great looking landscape. So a wide, good sized walkway makes a huge difference of whether the entrance environment. Just look at those classic homes, that nice wide walkway. strolling down the walkway to the entrance. Also adding some great looking containers. A lot of times homeowners think, they see this one container, it's nice, but it's way undersized. Getting a 6-inch tall container is not a good idea. You don't want to, you rather have one large one than 6 small ones. One large one that's packed full of great foliage, great flowers, and watering that one well and making sure that one looks great all the time. Also making sure you matching the if when you're making a container, try to match the watering conditions for all the plants to be the same. Not necessarily have to be exactly, but around the same area. That way your watering schedule could be, it's not going to be overwatering one and underwatering the other. So that's always important. Changing the color of the door is have a bright color door to be more inviting. Of course, we talked in the first hour about adding a perennial border. Fall color just as another. You were talking about a perennial border that will last for fall color 20 years. I mean, I planted this plant 20 years ago, and it's still there, blooming every fall, every year, and reliable. And if you live in a deer area, they're very deer resistant. So aster's radon's favorite, and it's about a compact aster, around 2 feet tall, lavender color, purple flowers in there, and it's bulletproof. 20 years old, and they're not really getting taken care of as much as they should, but they are still producing and reliable. They're not an A, but they're still a B, even with low amount of care. So planting a perennial border is always a good. Seasonal plantings, have coming in there with your fall plantings or your spring plantings, petunias, marigolds in the summer, those type begonias, if you live in the shade, always have good fall planting that will really, or a summer planting or spring planting will really improve the overall look give you that curb appeal. You're going to have to increase a little bit if you're having a seasonal planting, and when you're planting out annuals. How much water? What is your water commitment there? It's probably when you first plant it around 2 to 3 inches a week in a drought. So just to get them started. Well, this is the Home and Garden Show. Thank you for having us this weekend, and we'll see you next week.